In today's video, we're going to be looking at how to install 12 by 12 diamond pattern tile. We begin with the layout, and to do that we have two entry points, actually three including the garage, but this is going to be the most important one, so I want to make sure it looks the best as it's by the kitchen and leading into the master bedroom. So I start by cutting it back centered on the doorway. I'll just use my oscillating tool here to trim back the flooring. And I want to lay it out to where I have full tiles just like it looks there, and then half tiles on the diamond pattern. So after I remove that flooring to make sure it's centered, I can make sure the transition strip works well. There's a bunch of different kinds of transition strips. This is the one we're using for this. It comes with a cleat, so you just push down the transition strip into the cleat. Just like this here. So it's not, the cleat has to be raised, has to be shimmed up a bit to catch. That's just something I have to be mindful of for when I actually go ahead and install it. We can go ahead now and begin the Ditra process. It's pretty easy. It's easy to cut, easy to work with. It's in a waffle pattern grid, so you can just follow those lines that are already on the sheet to make your cuts. Cuts really easy with utility blade. And then I'm going to dry fit a bunch of these first. So I'm going to cut them to fit before I mix up some thin set. And again, I'm just cutting it with the utility blade. It's really easy to cut. And I'm going to work it to where I can set the transition metal strip on top of the Ditra, and that will act as a shim to the height I need. So it worked out well as well, just like this. Just make sure the height is good. Just saves a step down the road by using this. Works out. And I can continue cutting and laying and dry fitting all the Ditra so it's prepared and ready to go. And then I remove it all and I can begin hydrating the substrate. In this case it's plywood. Whether it's plywood or concrete, you should hydrate it, otherwise the thin set that you lay down to embed the Ditra, it will dry out too quick because it will pull the moisture out. And this just gives you a little bit of extra working time and creates a better adhesion, so you want to hydrate it all. I'm doing it piece by piece, the Ditra, just to not get myself into trouble. It's easier not doing too much at once, and this way I can do a whole piece and carry on. And have the Schluter specific Ditra, which is a 11/64 by 11/64, just to be different, I guess. And a piece of wood to push down the Ditra after I lay it. This is the consistency of my thin set. It's similar to yogurt, say. Instead of pouring it out of the bucket, I like scooping it out. Just it's a little less messy, I find. Takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't get on the rim of the pail then. Using the back side of the trowel, which is flat, I push it into the wood fibers, going a couple different directions to make sure it's keyed in properly. Going a little careful there around the floor just so I don't make a mess. And once I have it all keyed in like that, I can begin combing it out. I try to keep one direction as I comb it out. That prevents air bubbles from forming. You can go over it multiple times until you get it looking nice and clean. You don't want to take too long so it'll begin to skim over, but because it's so thin, the mix, it's easy to work with. So I comb it all out in one direction, try and keep my trowel on roughly a 45 angle too. If you change the angle, it will change the height of the ridges, which in turn will change the flatness of the surface. Then carefully I roll out my Ditra starting in one end, curling it down. Lay it on pretty lightly, that way you can shift it and move it a little bit if need be. You can see I give it one little nudge right there to get it fully where I want. And then beginning in the middle, working my way out, I push it in to the substrate. So starting in the middle, pushing out. That way I don't create any ripples or anything and it doesn't stretch. I make sure I fully go over it as many times as I need to. Often by the edges, you have to be a little more firm to keep them down. And I go ahead and continue on with that process. So nothing different. Lay out the thin set, or hydrate, lay out the thin set, comb it out, roll on my Ditra and push it out from the middle outwards. And then I can begin, here I'm showing that my transition strip works with the tile, which is good, but I I start by making sure I have a parallel line with my transition strip, which is parallel with the existing floor. I then make a mark, and what I want to do is make sure I start off square. The room's not square, but I can start off my tile having it square. So I move perpendicular to that line I just made and make a couple marks. I'll do the 3, 4, 5 method here, which means I mark 3 feet on this side, on that line, and 4 feet on my other line. And I want to make sure the distance between those two marks equals 5 feet. That will give me square. And again, I can make sure I start off square, but the room itself isn't square. It won't matter because it'll be broken up with cabinetry, but I want to make sure that these two entryways into the room look good because that's what will be seen the most. So I have 2 lines there. I can then make a 45 angle with my framing square. Once I have that 45 angle, which is just doing 11 inches and 11 inches or 12 inches and 12 inches on the legs of the square, I can extend the line of the square. So I'll move my square out of the way, making sure I don't lose my straight edge. And then I can mark and extend that line pretty much the length of the room. I think I'm hitting the other wall on that side. And that gives me a 45, which I can use as a reference for my tile. I do a bit of a layout here. It's easier to do a layout now, make sure everything makes sense. I'll go ahead and trim what I need to trim, cut what I need to cut. Those are full half tiles on both entryways. So it kind of mirrors each other, which is nice. And also it's centered on the doorway, which is a bit lucky actually that worked out that way. So I just do my full layout here. And then I can mix up some thin set and set this first batch of tile. Again, just scooping some thin set onto my Ditra. These are the self-leveling wedges I'll be using. The floor is pretty straight, but these do help with the tiles I'm using. And with the Ditra, I want to make sure I also use the backside of my trowel and key it into that waffle shape cavity. To do that, I want to go a couple different directions with my trowel, not just one direction, to make sure it's fully keyed in. You do go through a lot of thin set using Ditra because you're filling a pretty big void in those patterns. And then you can comb it straight, again trying to keep consistent with one direction. If you go multiple directions, you just can create air bubbles, which hinder leveling and setting the tile properly. I'm going to hydrate the backside of this tile. From then on, I'll back butter the tile with thin set. But with this one, there was a bit of a hump because it's a doorway, so it's often that there's something going on with the subfloor there. And I wasn't able to back butter it because of the height, so I hydrate it so it adheres better, add my self-leveling clips, and then I can continue on laying out a couple. And it's important for the first few tiles, 6 or 7 maybe, to make sure that they're really well set on that reference line that I'm going to go off of. Here I'm back buttering the tile. That just creates better adhesion and bonding. Shifting the tile back and forth, I collapse the ridges so there's more coverage on the back of the tile. And that's pretty much the process there. Key it in to the Ditra, comb it straight, add the self-leveling clips that I need to add. And then once they're added, I can go ahead, back butter, and lay the tile. My camera battery died, so you missed this part, but that's the first chunk of stuff done here. It turned out well. The straight edge I'm using here is just to make sure all my tiles are aligned before I get too carried away, because that's where I'm going to be ending for the day. It was a shorter day, so I just got started here. Once everything is where I want it to be, I'm just going to tighten up these wedges just with my hand, and that will help self-level them. And this is the next day. I removed the wedges already and the clips, and I can begin with the next phase. Because it's next day, I have a little bit of squeeze out from my tile, so just cleaning that out of the way. I have to be mindful of that so my 1/8 inch gap reveal is consistent. It's easy to get dry, thin set, causing issues if you're not aware of it. In this particular case, I can't get my trowel in there to comb it properly, so I'm just going to comb the back of the tile itself, which works fine. You just have to be aware it might lay down a bit differently. Gently put it in, move it back and forth a little bit to collapse the ridges. Once it's fully seated, I go ahead and continue on. Lay down my thin set, key it in. You can see just by pulling in one direction, it's kind of peeling out of the hole. So that's why I work it back and forth a few times. Pull it straight. Clean up the edges there. I use a sponge to clean up the edge too. Just helps in the long run to keep things clean. I decide which direction I want the tile to go because there are veins in these tiles, and you just have to be aware that you're not using duplicates or not having matching patterns, or go fully matching. You either go random or not random. We're going random with this pattern, which is difficult to do because you only have the veins going through the tile usually in 2 directions, so you don't have many options for making it random. Oh, there's a mess. Keep a wet sponge handy for times like that. And I'm just going to use horseshoe spacers, 1/8 inch, because I don't have those self-leveling clips because the previous tiles are dried. I should have put them down beforehand, but that's okay. I don't know why I'm pointing here, but I am. And yep, just carrying on. I can add a self-leveling clip there. And I'm careful to try and get my reveal consistent with this next day of tiling, because it's easy to start gliding and get carried away if you just move too quickly. But once I do, it's pretty smooth sailing from there. You can either go in a straight line or install them staggered. Because of the size of the room, I had to do a little bit of both. I would prefer to do a straight line. It's just easier to do, but I don't have the working space to do that. So it goes pretty quickly. It's just a repeated pattern of what you just saw. And before you know it, I'm done. I didn't get the last little bit of tile there, but this is what the floor looks like after it's all installed and mostly cleaned up. I just have to knock off those few wedges and it'll be done. There's cabinetry going against that framed wall there, and then baseboard and stuff too. All in all, I think it turned out pretty good, and it looks good after it was grouted. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next one.